Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome from Pacific Lutheran University and the 10th Biennial Wong Center Symposium. My name is Michael Halverson, the Benson Family Chair of Business and Economic History, and I'd like to welcome you to the Dale Benson Lecture in Business and Economic History, a tradition we started at PLU in 2004. Tonight, we have the opportunity to hear a presentation by Justin Spelhaug, a vice president at Microsoft and the global head of the Tech for Social Impact group at the company. Mr. Spelhaug will share with us his vision for tech innovation and social transformation and the role he believes that our students, faculty, staff, and alumni can play in this movement. The lecture and conversation afterwards is framed around the topic of healing in local and global contexts, which has been the organizing theme of our symposium. Over 2 days, we have heard deeply personal stories of trauma and hope, artistic visions for healing, numerous panel presentations, and a range of culturally sensitive approaches to healing and restoring relationships. This final lecture presents a technical and global context for healing, suggesting how creative partnerships and appropriate technologies might restore communities on a global scale. Before we begin, I want to make another specific acknowledgement about our own immediate community and its setting. As the other moderators have done, I want to remind our listeners that Pacific Lutheran University sits upon the traditional lands of the Nisqually, Puyallup, Squaxin Island, and Steilacoom peoples, and we acknowledge and respect the traditional caretakers of this land. I'm also delighted to thank our generous sponsors who have made the Benson Business and Economic History lectures possible. Since 2004, Dale and Julita Benson and the Benson Family Foundation have generously funded faculty members, students, staff, and members of the PLU community. It also feels timely to acknowledge that the Bensons were early and generous supporters of the Pluto online education system at PLU, which the university initiated 8 years ago. Without that visionary technological investment, the university would have been hard-pressed to continue functioning during the COVID-19 pandemic, which required that the university immediately pivot to online learning. With Pluto and a lot of innovative thinking, PLU remained open and succeeded in teaching and mentoring students. Indeed, many have flourished and discovered new skills and passions. I thought I would mention this fact today during our first virtual Benson lecture. Technology has allowed us to continue and to thrive in unexpected new ways despite disruptive change. We thank the Benson family for their visionary support in all of these projects. And now to our speaker. As a special treat for our 16th annual Dale Benson Lecture, we've invited Northwest native Justin Spelhaug to speak to us on the topic of technological innovation and social impact. As a leader for the Tech for Social Impact group at Microsoft, Mr. Spelhaug brings 22 years of professional experience spanning a range of commercial and social businesses. Prior to his current role, Justin served as the Chief Marketing and Operations Officer for Microsoft Asia Pacific, spending 7 years working across developed and emerging Asian markets. Mr. Spelhaug also helped to launch the Unlimited Potential organization within Microsoft, with a focus on developing new and more affordable computing solutions to close the digital divide for lower income societies globally. He has spoken broadly about the need to use appropriate technology to spark economic opportunity and to help organizations meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Justin Spelhaug began his career in the United States Marine Corps, earning numerous medals as part of his service. His hometown is also Seattle, where he graduated from the University of Washington with honors. A particular interest to our students might be that Justin didn't major in a STEM discipline on his way to Microsoft, but an interdisciplinary major that analyzed human behavior, social institutions, social policies, and ethics. With this interdisciplinary perspective, his day job is now to find ways to use technology so that everyone on the planet benefits, including the planet itself. Please give your full attention to Mr. Spelhaug, and as you listen, you may use the Q&A feature within Zoom to post a question. I'll return at the end of the talk to host a conversation with Justin using those questions and a selection of prompts that our students have already written.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. And I assume you can hear me perfectly well. I'll take the nod and the smile as yes. And just give me a moment, everyone, to share a screen here. and with the sound, and we'll go ahead and share that and get going. Okay, well, it is just great to be with such amazing students, staff, and community members here at our virtual event. I'm so sorry we can't be in person today, but it feels like each day we're getting just a little bit closer. I'm honored to be here and share more about how Microsoft's really working to deliver social impact through technology, but also through our broad business model. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Professor Mike Halverson for his vision on social impact innovation and, frankly, for the invitation to speak today. I'd like to thank the Dale E. Benson family for their endowment. I donated the honorarium that I was to receive to the social impact innovation work at PLU, and I saw that was getting put to good use because I had the chance to meet with President Belton and several really amazing students. And in so many ways, we're all connected on the same purpose, creating methods to make the world a better place and to help heal communities, which is at the core of this conference. Now, in my job specifically, I get to focus on how we apply technology to solve social problems in a way that both scales and has impact. Now, scale means reaching entire communities in a region, a state, a nation, or across the world. And impact means positively changing lives. And it's a really hard problem. Oftentimes, the programs we roll out, the technology we roll out can have impact but no scale, helping a few people, or scale with no impact. And the trick is doing both. And it's a challenging area because the problems are complex. But we do know that if we work together, we can all do more to really, frankly, reimagine a world that creates a future for every single person here on this planet. And that's why I'm really excited about this discussion. Now, hopefully, by the time we're done here today, I hope that you'll see how business can be a force for good. And we're going to talk about a lot of topics. I actually was looking at this deck going, it's really wide. We're going to talk about human rights to racial equity to the environment and the role that companies are playing, and Microsoft specifically is playing. But I'm casting the net really wide on purpose because I want to show you how broad a business can stretch to really make a difference. But you have to put your seatbelt on as we go through this discussion. Now, as the next generation of leaders here on this phone, you do have on this call, you have the opportunity to transform every organization you touch into one that truly contributes to the world in profound ways, whether that's a business, that's an NGO, that's a school, that's a corporation. And across everything I'll talk about, the thing that is most clear is that the world has really never needed you more than we need you today. So it's going to be a pleasure to talk through this. So let's start with maybe stating the obvious. And that is that we're clearly in a very, very different world in just 25 months. If we were sitting together 25, 27 months ago, and I was to say, hey, what's COVID? You would probably say, what's that? And if I was to say, what's January 6th? You would say that's the day after January 5th. And if I was to say Ukraine, you'd probably tell me that was an Eastern European country, not a war. And it's just a tremendously volatile time. And what we see is accelerated by COVID-19. There have been very, very rapid advances in technology that are really drastically changing how people live, work, and learn. And literally, we've seen years of digital transformation occur in mere months. And while there's really great possibilities for technology to address society's biggest issues, the rapid pace of change has also raised an entirely new set of issues. COVID-19 really has created a global health and economic crisis that, while the economies are coming back in many countries, it has disproportionately impacted vulnerable communities, and access to economic opportunity is far from equitable. On top of that, we've seen the tragic, unlawful, and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, and that's become both a kinetic and a digital war, with both horrifying images that we're all seeing and reading in the news, but also one of the battlefronts is really computer networks and the internet and disinformation. We'll talk about that. And while COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine are dominating our headlines, we all know that the climate crisis has never been more critical. And finally, all of it is played with technology, and ultimately there is an erosion in the trust behind companies that are providing technology. And it's critical that we apply new innovation to these challenges that we're talking about without sacrificing core values like trust, privacy, transparency, or inclusion. Now, to illustrate the impacts, just to give you a sense of the impact that COVID has had, I know it's a little bit out of the news, but I do want to make sure that we ground in just the magnitude of impact we've seen. This chart comes from the World Bank, and it shows really decades of progress of extreme poverty declining year after year after year. It only goes from 2017, but it is decades of progress. But when we look at how resources have been diverted and how people have been impacted by the pandemic and what's happened to the economy, what we see is 31 million people have been pushed into extreme poverty, and it's rolled back decades of progress. Now, I want you to think about extreme poverty as $1.90 per day. Stop, no matter where you're at in the world, and think about living on $1.90 per day. And you don't need to go overseas to see this impact. It's right here in our own backyard. I'm presenting in one of the wealthiest areas in Washington State, Redmond. I'm on the Microsoft campus here today. And just blocks away from this campus, probably less than one block, there is a housing area where my wife and I deliver food for folks that are not going to find their next meal. And I know these challenges are in your backyard too. You just don't need to look very far. So really that brings us to the core of this discussion, which is, so what is the role of business? Now, Milton Friedman argued, if you guys are in econ classes, argued that returning value to shareholders was the primary responsibility of a business. And he suggested, quote unquote, greed is good. But we know that businesses don't operate in a vacuum. We don't operate in a parallel universe where war and the social inequities and the environment doesn't somehow directly impact the prospects for us and every other business on the planet. And about 181 CEOs who form an organization known as the Business Roundtable created a new definition, moved away from the definition that Milton Friedman created, and created a definition that says, listen, shareholders' primacy can't be the only thing that a business focuses on. We need to have a commitment to serving all stakeholders. That includes customers, of course. That includes our employees. That includes our suppliers. It importantly includes our communities, and it includes our shareholders. And this is really recognized as the only way to be successful over the long term. And at Microsoft, our philosophy is simple. Companies that can do more should do more. It's not only the right thing to do, it's at the core of our mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And with more than 181,000 employees, 17 million partners, 75 million customers in 190 countries around the world, we have both an enormous opportunity, but I think you would probably all agree, an enormous responsibility to ensure that the technology that we create benefits everyone on the planet, including the planet itself. So at Microsoft, we really, underneath our mission statement, linked to these four interconnected pillars that we use as guideposts for everything we do. My strategy directly connects to this. The first pillar is supporting inclusive economic opportunity. As part of Microsoft, we need to ensure that economic opportunity is inclusive for every country, developed or developing, every community, urban and rural, every business, small and large, and every person, including the 1 billion people with disabilities and the underserved communities around the globe. We need to focus on protecting fundamental rights, the fundamental rights of all people, from addressing where we can through our technology and our business practices, systemic racial injustice and inequity, to defending democracy, to protecting human rights. We have to commit to a sustainable future and address climate change. A healthy society, a healthy business requires a healthy planet. And underpinning everything that we do as a technology company, none of this work can be done if people don't trust fundamentally the technologies or the companies behind them. Earning trust underpins everything we do and every decision ultimately that we make. But as a company, we can't do it alone. The issues that we're facing are complex, and no one company, sector, or even country can solve them alone. That's why at Microsoft, in so many other areas, we're committed to working with businesses, governments, NGOs, academics like PLU, change makers, to foster partnerships, public-private partnerships that can really drive lasting impact. It's also why we've activated employees who are so passionate about giving their time, their money, their skills to address issues. And it's only through these collective partnerships that real lasting impact is created at scale. So now what I'm going to do in the presentation is we're going to go take a look at each of those 4 pillars, and I'm going to describe, I'm going to set it up with the problem, what we're doing, and then I'm going to provide a case study. We've got a few different videos we'll show as well. So let's go ahead and dig into it. And I'll move this slide forward. So the first commitment we have here is really supporting inclusive economic opportunity. That's why we're investing in organizations, communities, and countries to create different pathways for growth and opportunity. And the area the surface area really that we have to focus on as a company is broad. We have to think about many different dimensions in how we think about creating economic opportunity. First, you can't have economic opportunity if people aren't fundamentally healthy. I think we all saw that in the last 2 years. And as of last week, we saw 445 million reported cases of COVID-19, 6 million deaths, and we know that the impact is disproportionate in underserved communities. Another dimension is that we estimate with the World Economic Forum that there'll be 97 million new roles that will require new digital skills, while 85 million jobs may be displaced by technology. Now, automation and computing had already set this trend in motion, but COVID-19 really accelerated it. And so millions of people will need to learn new skills to get jobs in the 21st century economy. That's a pathway to economic opportunity. But you got to have the internet to learn or to use these computer jobs, and nearly half of the global population doesn't have access to the internet. In the US, more than 18 million Americans, 14 million of which live in rural areas, don't have broadband access. But we have to support all kinds of people. And I think we're closing in on roughly 8 billion people on the planet. Of that, 1 billion people have some form of disability, but only 1 in 10 have access to the products and services they need. The unemployment rate for people with disabilities is typically twice that of people without. And that's why it's so critical to develop technologies that really support everyone. And finally, there are millions of nonprofits around the world who are on the front line of bridging this opportunity divide for so many underserved communities. And the demands on them have truly never been greater than they are today. But these organizations have been underserved by the technology sector. They lack access to affordable and innovative tools to help them support communities, including in the South Sound area, and that's a problem. So let's take a look at what we've done. I'm just going to move this here. Yep. What we've done in this area. Sorry, I just got to move my Zoom around here. Multiple screens. I think you can feel my pain with multiple screens. So, I think we've made some progress. And while these are big numbers on the slide, there is so much more to do. There's so much more we're learning. But I just want to give you a sense of how a business like Microsoft leans into these issues. So if we go back to those categories in health, we have over $410 million that we've invested into supporting COVID-19 response efforts. And we have an AI for health program that we're deploying to address critical scenarios. In the area of skills, we've engaged more than 48 million people worldwide with access to free learning content and pathways to help them build the skills to get the jobs for the future. In the area of broadband, we formed ranges of partnerships and we deployed new technology like TV white space technology that uses that static that you see on TV as a way to transmit broadband and reach 17 million people worldwide so far. We've built a new inclusive 5-year roadmap to build new technologies. You may have seen our Xbox accessibility controller, such as that, new technologies that will really reach those that have disabilities to include them into the work that we do. And the business that I get to run last year donated $2.8 billion in technology through gifts in kind discounts to 244,000 nonprofits around the world to equip them with the tools that they need to move their mission forward. But none of this tells really the full story. We know that the real goal here is changing lives. And prior to the pandemic, I had the opportunity to travel to the Kakuma refugee camp with the United Nations. And Kakuma is located between the border of Kenya and South Sudan. It's one of the largest refugee camps in the world with over 196,000 refugees, but it was built for less than 50,000 individuals. At the camp, opportunities are sparse and life can be difficult. They have schools, but less than 1% of their population goes on to higher education. And that's why meeting Grace here, who's in this picture, was so amazing. She lived in Kakuma since she was a little girl. And she started there tutoring her 6-year-old or her 6 younger siblings and helping them get through classes. She then started tutoring friends who are struggling in a culture, frankly, that prioritizes childcare and chores for girls, not education. Grace taught herself digital skills. And through the program that we built with the UNHCR organization and we initiated at this Camp Kakuma, she is now teaching others so that they might get access to better jobs and new economic opportunities. Let's take a look at Grace's story and see how this actually works in the real world.
My name is Grace Shimiumukiza. I'm 23 years old and I've been here for about 17 years. I am here because of war. I always say Kakuma is a place of opportunities, but only to those who seek them. I wanted to train women in basic computer skills. I just had the idea, but then it was not possible. You know, for you to start a project, you need to have some resources.
In a world that is increasingly adopting technology, we don't want refugees to be left behind.
We need to change the narrative of the refugee because they have skills and they have talents. If you give them the opportunities, you will see the impact.
UNHCR and Microsoft are pioneering a new partnership to provide future-ready digital skills to refugees and also members of the host community in Kakuma. It is a 3-year project which aims to provide digital skills training to 25,000 young refugees, and then we are empowering them to train and reach the others.
Now here comes people who will train me on how to do it, and they will give me opportunity to train others. It was like a dream come true. We will go through it, everyone will understand what we are doing. They are learning how do you open a computer, how do you shut it down, how to do data entry and operate businesses online. This is education for all.
The private sector really will play a very crucial role to partner with the humanitarian sector like UNHCR and other partners to help the refugees to start redefining their pathway.
Success will be when we're able to reach the most underserved members of the community, especially women who are often excluded. One of the focus of this project is to attain 50% participation of females.
Digital tools have played a very critical role to us because they have been our wings to fly out from Kakuma.
I feel very empowered. This is what I always wanted to do, and now it's here. Whatever dreams we have, we should be sure that it will one day come true.
Well, I love that video because it shows Grace, who's such an inspiration and hopefully a good example of how these initiatives can truly create inclusive economic impact. So let's talk about the next pillar, protecting fundamental rights. And I cannot think of another period in recent history where this has been more important. From the war in Ukraine to the systemic racism that persists here at home, I think it's super clear we've got a lot of work to do in this area as a community. And we've been committing to protect fundamental rights for decades, but the problems run deep. Systemic racism has long impacted opportunities and exacerbated injustices for Black and African American communities in the US and other underserved or underrepresented communities around the world. Democracies right now are under attack. According to the Institute for Security and Technology in 2020, nearly 2,400 US-based governments, schools, and healthcare facilities were the victims of ransomware. 2021 was the 16th consecutive year of a net decline of global freedoms. The conditions and political rights and civil liberties around the world are continuing in a state of decline. And we're witnessing the highest level of displacement on record, with 84 million people worldwide forcibly displaced. Every time I write this slide, it says 82. It's wrong because it keeps going up, and it's going to be wrong in about 2 more days because we're closing in on 5 million refugees from Ukraine, which is what we're expecting in total, which is just a huge, huge shift. Now, these are really humbling challenges, and we don't have all of the answers, but what we do know is we need to have a sustained effort to listening and learning, partnering with community, and working on these problems and contributing. In the area of racial justice, we launched a multifaceted and sustained effort that started with investing in our own culture and inclusion, extended out to how we engage with our partners and our ecosystem to strengthen their commitment to inclusion. And we made a pretty significant investment to support Black and African American led nonprofits who are really the front end of the community with the technology they need to really accelerate, reaching over 1,000 nonprofits in about the last about 15 months. In the area of defending democracy, we've got a range of technologies that we're building to secure political campaign and deploying to secure political campaigns from hacking, protecting voting integrity, and defending against disinformation. We've deployed a tool called Account Guard that provides advanced cyber protection to over 40,000 political customers and campaigns and organizations around the nation. And we've actually extended it now to NGOs, humanitarian organizations, newsroom, journalists, and healthcare organizations as well. We're working to stand up for human rights. We built a workers' voice hotline that was available to over 300,000 workers in the last year in our supply chain, giving them the voice to anonymously speak up for their rights and help ensure accountability within our ecosystem, and that we had the right working conditions. And we continue to respond to disasters around the world with the most, whether they're humanitarian or natural disasters, with the most recent being, that should be on the slide, being really Ukraine. And that brings me to my next slide. This issue, I know, it's on my mind, it's on my heart. I know it's probably on yours. And as a result of the unlawful invasion of Ukraine, at Microsoft, we have suspended all new sales of Microsoft products and services to Russia. But beyond this, one of the most impactful roles that we can play as a company is protecting Ukraine's cyberspace. Several hours before the launch of missiles or the movement of tanks, our Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, which we call MYSTIC, detected a new round of offensive and destructive cyber attacks directed against Ukraine's digital infrastructure. We immediately advised the Ukraine government about the situation, including our identification of the new malware package that was being sent down, and provided technical advice on the steps to prevent the malware's success. We're engaging now daily on emerging cyber threats. And last week, we launched a new program to provide our most advanced state-of-the-art technology to all the humanitarian organizations who are on the front line, free of charge. They have the most advanced tools that they need. Now, while Ukraine is top of mind, Ukraine is an example, the most recent example, of human rights abuses at a massive scale, but unfortunately, it's been preceded by many other examples, including this one. This is a picture taken in Iraq of a Yazidi family fleeing ISIL. And if you guys recall, thousands of Yazidi men, women, and children were killed by ISIL, either executed in mass, shot as they fled from conflict, or they died from exposure on Mount Sinjar as they tried to escape. And last year, I had the opportunity to present at the UN Security Council. There's my pixelated face there on that screen, on the role that technology played in UN investigation of these human rights war crimes. And I specifically explained how artificial intelligence could be used to seek truth and actionable insight in an ocean of data, so that investigators, researchers, frontline providers, and policymakers can take more effective action, ultimately delivering justice. Let's take a look at one video that we put together for one of the UN Security Council groups that explains how this technology comes together to help prosecute war crimes in a way that it takes us from a years-long journey to a months-long journey. And let's take a look at this.
In 2017, the Daesh was defeated by Iraqi, Kurdish, and coalition forces. At the request of the Iraqi government, the United Nations Security Council unanimously voted to establish the investigative team on 21 September 2017. The special advisor was nominated, and Unitad established its headquarters in Baghdad. Unitad collected and continues to collect an extensive range of material retrieved from the battlefield, extracted from mobile devices, computers, drones, and cameras. Crime scenes are surveyed and investigated using the latest technology. A Unitad-developed mobile app called Shuhud is used to securely collect testimony from ISIL's victims and witnesses. An evidence lifecycle management platform was developed in-house, allowing investigators to collect and record evidence directly from their computers or mobile phones. the investigative team has collected more than 50 terabytes of data and tens of millions of files. The team quickly realized that the daunting challenges presented by this enormous and complex collection of evidence could only be addressed with advanced technology. Working with Microsoft, UNICC, and OICT, the special advisor secured much-needed support to develop a digital data factory based on artificial intelligence and machine learning to process and enrich Unitad's evidence collection. Standard Microsoft cognitive services, coupled with Unitad's custom-trained models, are leveraged as data enrichment pipelines. Using Microsoft Video Indexer, each unique frame is analyzed to detect and extract faces and identify objects, gender, age, emotions, locations, and content concepts. Audio is extracted, converted to text, and translated to multiple languages. The review platform uses machine learning to pre-categorize documents based on review and analysis that has been performed of similar evidence. Customized reporting and email notifications help inform staff of the status of new evidence. Investigators use our e-discovery platform to create and refine case briefs and identify new lines of inquiries. The goal is to use the most advanced technologies in the collection and preservation of evidence which ultimately can be presented in criminal proceedings. If you would like to learn more about the technologies harnessed by Unitad,
Sorry, there we go. I think that is one of the clearest examples I can provide of how technology comes together to defend human rights. Now, certainly the climate crisis we face is the defining issue of our generation. And the scientific consensus is quite clear. The climate crisis can't wait. The world's temperature rise will soon hit the 1.5 degree mark unless dramatic action is taken. And we're already seeing the impact of that in the Antarctic with extreme weather events, the wildfires we see here in the Pacific Northwest, agricultural yields, and infectious diseases. Water, it's necessary for every person. I got my water right here. I love my water. But fresh water is not equally distributed around the world. According to the United Nations, 1 in 4 people may live in a country affected by chronic shortages of fresh water by 2050. That's going to drive some friction and some conflict. Every year, more than 11 billion tons of waste is produced worldwide, polluting our air and clogging our waterways, and 25% of the planet's species are threatened with extinction, and the number is rising rapidly. And at Microsoft, this is perhaps the area that we are perhaps the most progressive, and we've outlined a really, what I think is a bold plan in 4 key areas: carbon, water, waste, and ecosystems. And what we've committed to with our plan is to be carbon negative by reducing emissions by half and removing the rest from the environment, including from our supply chains, by 2030. Water positive by 2030 from our direct operations. That means we'll replenish more water than we use. We'll be, by 2030, zero waste for our direct operations and products, including eliminating single-use plastics in our packaging by 2025. And by 2050, we'll remove from the environment all of the carbon the company has emitted directly or by electrical consumption since its founding. So that is a relatively bold agenda, I would say, and we are still in the early days of what will be decades-long commitments, but we are making some progress. We reduced our carbon emissions by 587,000 metric tons and purchased the removal of 1.3 million metric tons of carbon. We launched water accessibility work to provide 1.5 million people accessible drinking water. We've diverted 60,000 metric tons of solid waste, and our AI for Earth program is helping over 700 different organizations tackle environmental issues, tackle conservation issues. And just prior to the pandemic, I had the opportunity to travel to South Africa to review several of our AI for Earth projects, including a key project with the Peace Parks. This is a picture of us discussing the project in a boring Microsoft office with the CIO, Craig, of the Peace Park. They're drinking coffee to the left of me. And in this meeting, we discussed really how artificial intelligence and sensors could be used to enable real-time sensing and analysis to support conservation efforts, including preserving one of the region's most iconic species, and that's the African rhino. Let's take a look at how this technology comes together. This is my very last video, and then we'll wrap it up. But I think this is a great video showing how technology really impacts conservation.
Philanthropies Park is a special park. It's known as the birthplace of the rhino. It's from here most of the white rhino populations actually originates. In recent years, organized crime has infiltrated conservation, coming in and poaching rhino. Last year was 769 animals killed. That's over 2 animals a day. Peace Parks Foundation, we work together towards a common goal, combating wildlife crime and trafficking within Southern Africa.
If we don't have technology that can support us, I promise you the rhino will decline. The park's got 96,000 hectares. You cannot identify exactly the direction these people are going to use. Even yesterday, we lose up 2 rhino. That's a problem. So from my heart, I need to make sure that I'm fighting the rhino poaching. If you touch rhino, you touch me.
Rangers want to save rhino. They don't want to be technicians. And that's where we started looking at Azure and the cloud.
What we're looking for is to detect suspicious human activities on the images taken by motion-activated camera traps.
They're just a camera that takes photo as soon as something moves past it. You know, animals moving past, wind blowing grass around. It's taking a lot of photos that you really don't want, and you have to look at each one if you really want to catch someone. The problem with that is obviously that you can only process so many photos every day. What we're able to do with this system is that this photo is processed by a machine learning model and only sends down the relevant photos, which is humans and vehicles.
At Nerve Center, we have a reaction unit team. The reaction unit team will fly straight to that area to make sure we save this rhino.
Before Azure was really not scalable, Microsoft's such a massive contributor to open source. Azure really makes it easy to use Linux operating systems. Everything runs on Azure Functions and on a Postgres database.
We are using Keras-based framework with TensorFlow, SSD, neural network architecture, faster CNN, YOLO v3, and RoutineNet. We used Azure machine learning compute with GPUs. It's very scalable. For our scenario, the latency that the model were giving us were perfect.
It's quite important to know where our data is. Now we can put that in the data centers here in South Africa.
Microsoft, they are really contributing to a cause in South Africa that really makes a massive difference. It's our heritage, these animals. They've been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. We want to keep it that way.
Another good example of how AI sensors come together to drive real conservation. Now, that's the last video. A lot of videos, but I did want to illustrate the impact of some of these projects, and all of that's possible because of this fourth and final commitment. All of what we've talked about can only happen if the people using our technology and services fundamentally trust them. And we're optimistic about the benefits of technology, but we also need to be clear-eyed about the challenges. And that's why we take our responsibility in this area very, very seriously. And we've been working hard to ensure that everyone is empowered to use the data, their data, how they want to. And that's why in the area of trust, privacy is so critical. And respecting people's privacy and empowering individuals with the data and the tools that they need to control how their data is used is essential. And that's why I've been working with the European Union's GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, to ensure that everywhere, whether you're in Europe, the US, or Latin America, you have access to your data and you're able to share it in the way that you want. We've also been investing in really advanced cybersecurity capabilities for a long time. We have a digital crimes unit that collaborates with law enforcement to really disrupt many of the cyber threats that we see around the world. Relative to AI, we've really leaned into the responsible framework for developing AI, and we've developed an Office of Responsible AI, which has helped put together 6 principles on how we develop technology, AI technology, to be reliable, safe, private, secure, inclusive, and accountable. And we're also working to advocate to shape norms and laws. And then finally, we're committed in everything that we do to ensuring that there is a great degree of transparency in all of our cyber work. Now, we'll bring this all together, and hopefully the discussion of the 4 societal pillars here helps you understand the role and, frankly, the duty of business, and in this case, Microsoft, to support to positive social and environmental issues. Now, we covered a lot of issues, from refugees to Ukraine to ISIL to the environment. They can be overwhelming and they can be depressing sometimes when you look at them like I've just shared. But we can and we will build a better future. There is time, but it will require all of us, business leaders, faculty, government leaders, NGOs, international organizations. We all have to come together with a focus to create positive change. And regardless of what side of the political spectrum you sit on, I just love this quote: change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And you on this call, you're the next generation of leaders. You're the ones that we have been really waiting for. And you don't need to go out and change your degree from poli-sci to computer science. Solving these tough problems requires an interdisciplinary approach. We need talent from the humanities, the arts, sciences, engineering, across public, private, and NGOs coming together to solve these problems. I would say the humanities have never been more important in technology, because it's not just really answering the question of what can technology do. It's answering the question of what should technology do to have real impact. We also need people with a growth mindset, people who are willing to commit themselves to lifelong learning. Why? Because these problems are complex, they're always changing, and you always need to be learning. Every day is different, every problem is different, and the key skill is being a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. And finally, real change happens one person at a time, one student, one job seeker, one refugee at a time. Don't be daunted by the scale of the problems that I just framed. Find a way that's most meaningful for you to contribute. Mother Teresa was quoted in saying, if you can't feed 100 people, then just feed one, because you're moving the world forward in doing that. And finally, if not you, then who on this call? Then who? PLU. I know it's the PLU students. Thank you for listening to me. I hope we can achieve, I hope I helped achieve the objective of sparking one new inspiration for you, one idea that you might be able to take forward. Thank you. And I'll pause here and hand over for questions.
All right, I'm going to join back in here and you can end your presentation.
Yeah, working on that.
And then we will get to go in with some questions.
There we go.
Great. All right, well, Justin, thank you so much for this presentation. It's really, really powerful to hear. And these are many of the issues we've been talking about on our campus. And as we do our study away and as we think about the future for students, but also as we bring people back to be nourished by the university, we really appreciate it. PLU is relatively close to Microsoft, and we have a lot of PLU alums that have worked at Microsoft and continue to work there. Some of them are on this call. And so this is important for not just our students, but our whole community. So I've got some questions coming into the Q&A, and I encourage people to continue to post them. We'll get to the ones that we can, and I'm going to be the DJ that's going to curate them and kind of put them together. And Justin, if I can, I'm going to begin with this one that kind of fits what a few people were asking. You were mentioning the United Nations Sustainability for Sustainable Development Goals. As part of this, you were talking about the leadership there. How important are these UN Sustainable Development Goals in the way that organizations are working and collaborating? How is that kind of a framework that helps?
Yeah, so for those that aren't familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, that there are 17 different goals from everything from equality to the environment to poverty. And really, I think today they are the only internationally standardized yardstick that we have for both defining the world that we want to see and measuring our progress to that world. Behind each of the goals, there are a set of indicators and outcomes that companies, nonprofits, civil society can use to look at their contribution and progress towards those goals. I would also say the relevance of the goals are universal, but the understanding and their popularity is a little different depending on the circles that you travel in. Certainly in Europe, it is the common standard. In the United States, it depends on which industry you're in, but ultimately, I think that it is the standard by which we internationally measure progress on all of these, define and measure progress on all of these issues.
Okay, perfect. Now I have a question here about the influence of big data and technology. There's a lot of talk about big data and tech, but how can smaller organizations use data if they're not some big Microsoft? How are smaller organizations going to effectively use data in their work?
Well, as probably a bad analogy, we've said data is the new oil. It is the element, the core molecule that animates intelligence in a business or a company or a nonprofit. When we to kind of link to the issues that we're talking about, when we think about issues like homelessness in the area in South Puget Sound, one of the challenges that we have with data is just data sharing and being able to use small data, for lack of a better term, between community-based organizations so that we can better coordinate services effectively to deliver services for individuals that need them between organizations, whether it's a hospital, a nonprofit, a church, and a school, all have to work together to support John Smith with the services that we need. And we're working on platforms that can facilitate that. And we're working with community to define the data standards and the data models that will enable that. So big data and small data are critical for solving all of these social issues, but we've got to find ways to unify it to create a more complete picture of the problem that we're solving and the organizations that are involved.
Great, thank you. I have a student question here that just came in, and it is asking about AI bias. And the question is, what is Microsoft doing about perceived AI bias in software, and how might AI be more inclusive?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? If you train AI on a data set that is representative of one population and not another population, it will inherently build bias into the algorithm. So it's incredibly important that every organization that's building AI systems has the process and principles to create the guardrails so that they're ensuring that as they build models, that they're using data sets that are truly representative for the problems that they're trying to solve. And the way we've tackled that in Microsoft is we've put together this AI ethics committee. We've put together an entire framework for how any engineer should be building AI solutions. And when we get into tough issues, looking at how AI is used as an example for refugee identification, we sit down with that ethics committee and really make sure that the models that we're using are inclusive, fair, trusted, and safe. And I think it's a great responsibility for any engineer in the AI space.
Thank you. Awesome. Someone's asking a really interesting question about Microsoft's internal systems and how you might track the company's progress towards some of the goals that you've set out, like maybe goals related to the climate or sustainability. Like, how can the company sort of know that it's hitting its targets? How would you do that? How would you set up incentives for that?
Does anybody at PLU know how to use Excel? No, I'm just joking. No, you're expecting a really sophisticated answer, but I think let me be honest and truthful, right? That we have defined, I think, some pretty rigorous goals, as you saw in the area of the environment, and we track those rigorously. But the systems we're using right now, there's a range of different tools that we're using, up into and including Excel. But I would say there's an important point within this, which is I think shareholders are demanding that companies continue to make strong progress on ESG, right? Environment, social issues, and governance. And we're going to have to continue to build increasingly sophisticated tools to enable the transparency and reporting that is necessary and that shareholders will demand, so that across all of those different initiatives that you saw, we have one way to really easily present those results. Today, we can present the results, as I just did, but it takes a lot of work still to pull all that together.
Yeah. Speaking about shareholders and their interests, obviously Microsoft, public company, closely watched, really important company for value for shareholders. Justin, from what I heard, you're giving away a lot of money. You're investing a lot of money in our communities. You're explaining why and how you're doing that, but shareholders may wonder about that because it might have an impact potentially on profit. So How do you think about that? How does the company think about that?
I'm glad you asked that question. I'll put it at two different levels. Number one, when we think about the stakeholders that we need to serve, shareholders are one of the stakeholders that we need to serve, that is inclusive of also serving customers, our supply chain, our communities, and critically our employees and our shareholders. So really, business has to build a balanced approach to serve all of those stakeholders if it wants to be in business for any period of time that is over a few years. And so that's for the number one point. Number 2 point, though, is business is in the business of delivering profitable solutions. Okay. And so when we look at a business like digitally supporting nonprofits, we have to do that in a way that is sustainable. And while we will donate and discount over $2 billion in technology, right, each year, we also will sell to some of the larger organizations at a very discounted rate technology, so that at the end of the day, we're able to balance it out and generate a sustainable model that can work inside of a corporate environment. So first answer is you got to take a broader view, but the second answer is you do need to build sustainable models that balance profit and purpose.
Okay, I appreciate it. Mark Mulder, who's the Dean of our School of Business, you need to get with Justin and have him into a class or two, because this is exactly what I hear you saying all the time. This is exactly what our School of Business talks about. I want to ask you, a few students have asked about your interdisciplinary training, your background. I have in my notes that you studied society, ethics, and human behavior. As an undergraduate, which is intriguing. We have a lot of interdisciplinary programs at my university. I'm connected to a number of them. I'm shout out to the faculty and students who support them and that are listening to this call. But what does that curriculum give you? What did it personally give you as in your life? Yeah, no, I think taking society, ethics, and human behavior specifically,
it engages you in learning a really diverse body of knowledge, from Russian history to philosophy and ethics to pop culture, a class I didn't get a good grade in, to physics. You know, and what's important about that is that you're getting trained to critically think and reason through really diverse problem sets constantly. You're getting trained fundamentally on how to learn and how to think. And that pattern of diverse topics, different structural models, different critical thinking models, is the pattern that we find in business. No problem's the same. Everything's different. Every day is changing. You know, I've just spent the last week diving deep on how we should be thinking about Ukraine. I wasn't planning to do that a couple of months ago. And that liberal arts background gives you that fundamental rooting, I think.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, you were also in the Marines. That's something that I mentioned in the introduction. That's something, Justin, that's going to really resonate with a lot of our students, alumni, and community, because our university is sitting next to one of the largest military bases in the U.S. I mean, we have students here with many military ties, including some of those who served and then went to college. What was the experience, you know, what did the experience of being in the Marines teach you, and how did it help you frame your future?
Yeah, well, for anybody who's served, thank you for your service if you're on the call. And I wasn't the most disciplined teenager, I have to say, Michael. I wasn't, I needed a little bit of work. And I would say that the Marines taught me the value of hard work and discipline, number one. And sometimes you need to be taught that. And it's the cornerstone of the military. It also taught me teamwork. Nothing happens. Anybody in the military will let you know nothing happens in the military without a combined team effort. It also allows you to lead large groups at a really early age. At 21 years old, I was able to lead about 70 people, and you don't get that opportunity in the business world. And finally, both my parents were social workers, so we didn't have a ton of money. Paying for a chunk of school was also important. So that's what else it gave me, I'd say.
That's great. Thank you. I have a student who is asking a really interesting question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I just think the student's very impressed and just says, look, you're working at a big, powerful company like Microsoft. Have you ever felt a sense of imposter syndrome, such that you're just not sure that you're up for the challenge? And we won't tell anyone, Justin. This is a quiet Microsoft PLU sort of conversation. But
every promotion, every new job, you feel. I'll tell you, there's two dimensions of feeling the imposter syndrome, by the way. One is getting more responsibility and kind of really saying, am I stacking up? And everybody in this call has probably said, okay, I got to fake it till I make it. And there's some truth to that. And I don't think you ever feel fully ready for big challenges. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called big challenges first. The second, for me, is trying to make sure that there's real integrity and depth behind the work that we're doing. It's not some form of greenwashing. I'm not tricking myself in my own mind thinking that we're doing good work when we're just not doing the work that we need to. And every day, I'm dissatisfied by the balance that we're getting between mission and margin. But I think it's that dissatisfaction that propels us to create better programs. So that's another form of that same phenomenon.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you for answering that. I have a student here who's asking about the immediacy and speed of the internet, which you demonstrated in your talk. And the student is wondering, is worried about that, is worried about the speed and just the hyper speed of social media, of information, of news flows, and wondering how we might kind of accommodate for that, and maybe the unintended consequences on users, just from the speed of all these transactions. And I think the lack of kind of thoughtful reflection that sometimes happens. You're not responsible for the entire internet, but it's on the student's mind.
I'd probably step even further and say that the speed and speed of information and the kind of information that's being put into the internet right now has been a fundamental challenge to democracies around the world. That's true, right? Disinformation is a real challenge. It is a real problem. And, there is work that we're doing and supporting with respect to regulations in that area. There's work that we have done with respect to Ukraine. If we look at the Russian disinformation campaign to remove certain media outlets from our content that are spreading disinformation. And there's technology that we're looking at building that will give the reader a better understanding of that chain of information. What was the source of that information that you might be reading, or that video that you're watching, or the TikTok that you're watching? All of that has the ability to do incredible good, but it also has the ability to do incredible damage. And I think we all need to be using our voices to ensure that we're getting the right controls put in place to protect what we love about the U.S. and so many other countries around the world and our democracies.
I have a student here who's really appreciative of your comments about the war in Ukraine. Felt like it was a strong and kind of a powerful statement that you and Microsoft have made. Do you think that is going to be more typical for companies going forward? I guess, some people feel like Wall Street kind of has its own agenda and is sort of quietly watching a lot of the world come by. And this student's sensing that Microsoft's a little bit different in that way.
Yeah, and those principles, those 4 principles that I shared, are really being used, and I hope that came through in my conversation. And when we think about human rights, which we view the war in Ukraine as a violation of human rights in many ways, because it was an illegal, unlawful invasion, is not only an ethical problem, which makes me, sick to my stomach when I think about it, but it's also a business problem. If we don't have societies that consistently value human rights, that consistently uphold the sovereignty of nations, it's very, very difficult to conduct business. And so I think, a business approaches this in a 2-pronged way, both from an ethics perspective and for the sake of doing business. And yeah, certainly if we see other infractions of that magnitude by, other events around the world, we will be speaking up. But to be clear, it's because it violates our ethical framework, and it's going to degrade the role of our business and the role that technology can play in the world.
Thank you. A student is asking you to kind of just, if you have to pick one of the problems that you outlined as the most important, and it's the one that's just most pressing to you, and other tech companies. I mean, what should we really all focus on solving? Is there one theme here that we should really address?
Boy, I wish there was. So the answer is I don't think there is. I would say, though, if we want to put a filter on these things and look at what we think could be the largest systemic issue to society, it is certainly the environment, because the water shortages that I talked about, global warming, lack of food, will drive all kinds of geopolitical challenges, not to mention problems in our very own backyard. So that really is the issue of our generation. That is our long-term issue that we have to lean in together. In short term, and medium term, we got to continue to lean in on these flashpoints around the world, like Ukraine, and make a positive difference there. But if we don't get the environment headed in the right direction, we've got some pretty existential problems.
Yeah. Justin, we've got one more question here, and it kind of ties us into PLU a little bit. Maybe we could spend a moment with this and then wind things down. It's been such a great evening, but this question relates kind of to PLU. At PLU, we have this mission statement that asks us to educate students for lives of thoughtful inquiry, service, leadership, and care for other people, for their communities, and for the earth. This is one of the reasons that we asked you to come today, because we feel that this is what your group is trying to align itself toward. But what advice do you have for universities like PLU or others that are emphasizing service in this way to local and global communities? I mean, can universities be a partner to Microsoft and other social impact type companies?
Absolutely, and they should be. Nothing is achieved at scale without public-private partnerships, without academic, nonprofits, corporations, and governments sitting around the table working on problems. And, just one example of that is here in Washington, we're making some pretty substantial investments in housing and homelessness. Now, PLU and universities are positioned, and I think can be labs where we decode together what truly works in particular communities, because every community is a little bit different, and can help us with the research, frankly, that's needed for communities, can help us run trials and experiments, because if these problems were easy to solve, they would have been solved. We need to get trials and experiments to learn what's going to work. And they can be centers where we have applied programs to go solve some of these challenges. It's been so interesting, with the response to the COVID pandemic, how central schools became in really being the front line in so many ways of social services and healthcare, because they were trusted, unlike maybe some more traditional medical institutions. And so I really do think universities have a multifaceted role to play in both representing a community's interests, plugging in with corporations on research and applied trials and science, and being new channels to communities, frankly, or alternative channels to communities to more effectively deliver programming through. And we look forward to partnering with PLU to find a way to do that, because this is our shared backyard, our shared land, as you started the discussion with, and we need to continue to contribute in that way.
Justin, thank you again. Normally, we're very clappy and applausy at PLU. We're in our hearts. We're giving you a big applause right now. Hope you can feel that. That's the time that we have for this evening. But I want to thank you again for coming and being our speaker, being with us today, sharing your time with us. And we also want to thank everyone that made this symposium and lecture possible, including our amazing technical staff, the Wong Center team, along with Dale and Jolita Benson, the Benson Family Foundation. All of our event sponsors have made it great. If you're interested in learning more about social innovation and social impact at PLU, of course, please visit our website. That's www.plu.edu/innovation-studies. And you'll see my contact information there. I'm Mike Halverson. I welcome an email from any of you. Just tell me what inspires you about this topic or how we can partner. We'd also like to thank you all for taking part in the 10th biannual Wong Center Symposium at PLU. This is our last event and we're closing it now. So we're closing our symposium. The theme has been Healing, Pathways for Restoration and Renewal in Local and Global Contexts. Our two-day lineup of lectures, panels, personal stories has been rich and so inspirational. I think we have learned that healing takes time, and it's also a process. It often begins on a granular person-to-person basis. Healing can also be powerfully enabled by policies, systems, and organizations like we've heard tonight. This is some of the most important work that we can do as human beings. So thank you again for attending, and we hope that you can keep in touch, and good night to everyone. Thank you so much. This is PLU saying good night.